Thank you, ma'am, for the kind words and introduction. Thank you to Taxmann and the organizers for giving us this opportunity today to present on this very important topic of development of enterprise and service hub. Thank you to the participants for taking our time today to discuss this important topic. So what we are going to do in the next 60 minutes is between me and my colleague Rahul, we are going to talk about the DESH bill. I will put the context and give you a certain background, and we will talk about some of the uh, real examples of how DESH could impact the existing SEZ developers units, which could be manufacturing and service units, and also look at a comparison of this new bill vis-a-vis the ongoing export incentive schemes which the government has. And we will conclude with a few question and answers from your side. With that, I'll quickly proceed with the topic itself. As a background, the evolution of SEZ regime was in 2005 by way of enactment of the SEZ Act in 2005. The SEZ, as we all are aware, are geographically bound areas which are notified as custom bonded areas and are deemed to be outside customs territory. The focus of SEZs have been exports with net foreign exchange obligation which have been cast on the units. The SEZ scheme, which was introduced, it was introduced with the intention of boosting foreign direct investment in India, with primarily focusing on export-oriented manufacturing. However, the sector which has actually gained momentum in recent years is IT sector under the SEZ framework. The global competitive advantage that India had initially under the SEZ over the last 2 years have actually slowed down in pace. If you look at the reasons, it's primarily the several ASEAN countries, they have undergone a regulatory and economic policy change. The governments in these countries are fairly attracting foreign investment by providing lucrative incentives and operational flexibility to international players. So that has caused the SEZ to lose its initial sheen which it had. If you look at statistically today, we have about 378 SEZs which have been notified. However, out of this, only 265 SEZs are operational. That means to a larger extent, over 100 SEZs which were initially notified have either been denotified or not been operational. Also, the SEZ's export, if you see the exports out of SEZ, it is less than 20% of the overall export which India does. So in that sense, SEZs have somewhere been losing out as the government it thought of that they would be a backbone to export, boost manufacturing, but somewhere down the lane, we seem to have hit a roadblock. And it is exactly in this background to examine the ramification of the SEZ policy and to bring in global best practices to maximize capacity utilization and potential output of SEZ. The MOC constituted a Baba Kalyani committee. This committee submitted its report sometime in November of 2018, and some of its points, as we speak, have already been incorporated under the existing SEZ policy, and some of these are proposed to be forming under the new DESH bill. So, coming back to the main subject, so what is the need for the new SEZ law, which we call it SEZ law 2.0 or the DESH bill? And there we need to draw reference to some of the pointers which were put forward by the Baba Kalyani report. Primarily, there are four challenges which you see on the left-hand side of this slide, which the current SEZ schemes face. First and foremost, there is a lack of integration with the domestic market. What it means is that the SEZs are focused on exports. There is a net foreign exchange earning obligation which is cast on the units. and therefore the focus has been exports. So there is, to that extent, there is a lack of integration when you are supplying to the, or restrictions for supplies to the domestic market. Secondly, there has been unstable fiscal regime. You step back, see MAT, DDT, which were imposed, the income tax exemptions were withdrawn. Even today, there is no interplay of these fiscal benefits with the state policies and what the incentives the state governments offer. So clearly, the fiscal regime around SEZs has been unstable over the last decade. Third, from an ease of doing business perspective, these are measures which still have a long way to go. While there is a single window clearance concept under the SEC, but it has, for whatever reasons, not been fully implemented as of date. Fourth and foremost, again important, is the WTO compatibility. We all would know that India lost the case at WTO, which was primarily that there was a WTO ruling which held that these schemes, like the SEZs, they are non-compatible under the WTO norms, as India is subsidizing exports, which is against the WTO scheme. Now, in light with these four challenges, we now need to look at the new DESH bill or SEZ 2.0 law, which is being proposed. Uh, Before I get into the law, what is also relevant to note is that there are three pillars against which the government is framing this legislation. And these three pillars are refocus, simplify, and evolve. Uh, when I say refocus, the objective here is creation of modern industrial parks, which are employment and economic enclaves. And these will comply with the overall obligation of the WTO requirement. When you talk about simplify, this is to improve the system so as to reduce compliances, enhance the autonomy of SEZ level authorities, and have a stronger single window mechanism. Third, evolve, which is to get state governments as key stakeholders, and creation of a future facing framework is what the government is looking at. So these are the three frameworks around which the government is working. And when we look at these three framework and you look at what the DESH bill has in store, you will see clearly, unlike the SCZ ecosystem, the government has now proposed to create development hubs, which will focus, which, so I'll just on the previous slide only, which where the focus would not be limited to exports, but also to create a domestic market. The bill will seek to integrate existing industrial estates, such as textiles and food parks, by converting them into development hubs. So clearly, the focus is shifted from export to a larger economic activity, and also to get states on board. The government is taking that extra step to convert the existing industrial estates and parks into development hubs. The DESH bill will classify two types of development hubs, one being enterprise hub and the other being the service hub. While enterprise hub will have land-based area requirement and will be allowed for both manufacturing and service activities, the service hub will have a built-up area requirement and will be allowed for service-related activities only. These hubs, which will come up under regional boards of state, could be created by the center or state, or jointly by both, or by any goods or service provider. Effectively, what the DESH bill seeks to achieve is a better cooperation and a greater alignment between the center and state governments, so that the businesses have greater access to fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. So that's the change which we are looking at from the current SEZ regime as we move to the new concept of development hubs which is enterprise and service hubs under the new DESH bill. With this background, moving on to some of the key highlights of the DESH bill, and when you look at, we've sort of selected these 10 points for discussion today. Primarily, if I am to look at the objective of the DESH bill, the objective is much broader than what the SEZ legislation had. To start with, what the DESH bill looks at is NPG, which is net positive growth. And this will be the criteria which will be used to evaluate units' performance. It will be no longer that a unit needs to earn foreign currency, but what is the net positive growth which the unit is achieving over a period of 5 years or year on year is what the government proposes to look at. And it's in this context that parameters like additional economic activity, employment generation, development of infrastructure, promotion of investment, and R&D, these will gain more importance rather than catering to the export markets. So that's the broad base which the DESH bill is looking at. Also, as I mentioned earlier, state governments now need to play a key role, and therefore there will be a larger collaboration with the states to provide fiscal and non-fiscal benefits. An example here, a lot of states today have state policy. They incentivize based on investment and these incentives could be giving you GST benefits or refunds on output. Could be stamp duty, could be electricity, could be land at a differential price, could be electricity duty. So these benefits which are currently available under a state policy for a domestic manufacturer or a manufacturer catering to the domestic market, all encompass should be provided to units or hubs in the enterprise or service hub where they fulfill criteria of net positive growth. So effectively, not only the benefits which the central government provides, but larger incentives which are fiscal and non-fiscal as provided by state governments are also likely to flow when units are operating out of these development hubs in the new era of SEZ 2.0. Moving ahead in terms of, this was a broad objective which I said, which is broader. The other elements which you look at, point number 4 here, when you look at notification of development hubs. Now, clearly the current DESH bill has enabling provisions to allow conversion of existing industrial estates into development hubs. Therefore, there is no long drawn process, but there is clearly an enabling provision. Now, in addition to moving into industrial hubs, also what we believe is the rules which will likely come out will also have easy denotification of development hubs, including partial denotification of certain flows. Now, during the last 2 years, this has been an ask from a lot of developers. And also we have seen units move out of SEZ because of certain constraints of work from home and not being allowed to actually work from home for a point in time. Now, with that, the government has brought about this process where they are saying that even while you are in development hub, for a service hub, there is a flexibility of partial denotification. And when we say partial denotification, we are looking at examples that even floors could be debonded while the entire building would physically be located in a development hub. So this gives an opportunity for companies to look at operations, and we will talk about what those opportunities are as we go along. But this is overall on notification and denotification, which is provided under the SEZ, under the DESH bill. Interestingly, the DESH bill also has a section on dispute resolution and enforcement, which unlike any other legislation is not there. And what I mean with this is that the DESH bill actually provides mediation framework for commercial disputes between units and developers so as to enable speedy dispute resolution. There are also enabling provisions to make a reference to arbitration for commercial disputes. So this is something totally different where the legislation is providing a bench for units and the developers to come and mediate any commercial disputes rather than directly going to the courts. So this is also a very positive provision which has been brought in from a overall perspective or commercial perspective. If you move in on the right hand side to some of the points, here I would like to bucket these points into two baskets. One is ease of doing business. From a ease of doing business, clearly you would see the first 2 points, which is there is a change in subcontracting provisions, which means that early on SEZ units could subcontract part of their work to a domestic manufacturer. But under the new legislation, a domestic manufacturer can also subcontract work to SEZ. And therefore, what this actually entails is that a unit which is going to be in development hub can have more capacity building, can take in more work, even for units in the domestic market. So this is subcontracting to and fro domestic DTA units, which is being permitted in the DESH bill. Obviously, this will come with certain guidelines in terms, is there a threshold limit up to what these subcontracting can take place? The moot question out here would still remain that whether services could be subcontracted or this is limited to only the manufacturing. The other part on ease of doing business is primarily from a service unit perspective. Under the current regime, service units could provide services in domestic market. However, the domestic units had to pay those service units which are in SEZ in foreign currency. Now, this requirement of payment in foreign currency is being dispensed with under this new legislation, and therefore domestic units can pay to the SEZ in INR, which is again beneficial for the units, and therefore overall as a concept it goes with that the development hub is giving greater access to the Indian market. Also, what is to be note is that there is a concept of provisional approval for certain types of approvals to fasten the process of approval. And also there are pre-cleared zones with certain central government approvals being deemed to have been provided to every unit in the zone which have been introduced. So both concept of provisional clearance and pre-cleared zones which are being there would help units to set up operations much faster and do business in a more friendly manner. So these are points from a ease of doing business perspective. The second bucket is more from a fiscal and non-fiscal benefits which are there. Primarily, we're speaking out here of fiscal benefits, but what is important for us to understand is the drastic change which the DESH bill brings in terms of the duty elements which are there under the current regime when you look at SEZ. Today, when goods are manufactured in SEZ and they are sold in the domestic market, the customs duty is paid on the value of the finished goods. Under the DESH bill, what is proposed is that when the finished goods is sold in the domestic market, the duty would be limited to the raw material which is used in manufacture of that finished goods. So to the extent of raw material used, companies would have to reverse or pay back the customs duty which they have not paid at the time of original import. Therefore, they would enjoy that cash flow advantage which this new legislation would bring in, and it is and there is no duty which would be paid on the finished goods, no customs duty which would be paid on the finished goods. So that is a drastic change from the existing legislation. However, what was proposed rather in the first draft bill was that if goods are sold or even services are rendered in the domestic market, there would be an equalization levy on those goods or services. What was the percentage was not defined. Whether this would be a cost or credit was not there. And our belief is that if this is going to come in, this would actually be a cost as a deterrent to supply goods or services to the domestic market. However, the current understanding is that this equalization levy is not likely to come in. It was while it was part of the initial discussion based on industry representation, this may have been dropped, and which is likely a benefit for the industry because this again goes against the main concept of the DESH bill, which is providing greater market access. So this was a dampener which hopefully should not be there. The other point, which is more of a policy discussion at this stage, is the income tax benefit. So beyond the indirect tax benefit, which I mentioned that duties would be levied only on the raw material and not on the finished goods. The proposal which is being discussed between the ministries is that the income tax benefit of 15%, which should be given to up to 2032 or not. And this is the discussion pans from whether this should be greenfield, brownfield, and cover goods and services both. So this is a larger debate which is going on, and we'll have to wait and watch what finally happens on this income tax benefit. But this is a big bet which is being discussed within the ministries. Also, the last point from an incentive perspective is uh, from a GST perspective, where SEZs were treated as deemed foreign territory, even uh, under the new DESH bill, any supplies are treated as zero rated and GST would be exempt. That is what the current understanding is, and which is also very good if even, and this benefit would even come in if the finished goods are sold in the domestic market, unless we see the rules come out to put a condition on these exemptions. But the bill uh, just identified that supplies to development hub would be zero rated from GST perspective, and therefore giving that additional advantage. Also, the infrastructure status is being provided to the development hubs, and these are coming at par with other sectors, so that there is an improved access to finance and enabling long-term borrowing from lenders at easier terms. So these are some of the fiscal benefits which are over and above the existing SEZ schemes, which are likely to flow in under the new DESH bill. With this background, I'll pass on to my colleague Rahul to get you some live examples how this would pan out when we look at different segments from a developer to a manufacturing unit to a service unit. Uh, yeah, Rahul, over to you. Rahul, you're on mute. This maybe Rahul, you are on mute, so you'll. Yes. Yeah, Rahul, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks, Gautam. There is a bit of a technical glitch here. So as Gautam walked you all on the incentives or the key highlights of the DESH bill, and it's sort of a plus on the SEZ policy because for the reasons which Gautam explained. This leads us to a point where a lot of questions will come while we are trying to develop and discuss certain scenarios, but these are not exhaustive. And also, mind you, as Gautam pointed out, that it's only a bill which is currently in the deliberation stage. It also has not attained a finality. And we understand from our past discussion, when the last discussion happened on 29th of August, and Commerce Secretary said that both the rules and the act will come together. Expectation is this will go into the winter session, and there is still deliberations going on, inter-ministerial consultations happening, and the contours will depend upon the final shape of the bill or the act and the rules, how they will shape out, because the rules will give more clarity or the insight on what the intent or how the objectives of the DESH bill will be implemented, including the integration with the state policy or the state involvement. So some of the scenarios from that point. So one question that comes up is whether a developer who's an SEZ developer, whether he should maintain a status quo versus he should consider exiting. Now, on the left side, if you see the currently a developer, and I'm more talking from a business perspective, developer enjoys benefit or duty exemption benefits on setting up the SEZ um, and providing certain services, authorized infrastructural facilities, etc., along with the developer or on a standalone basis. The units come in, which forms the business of the SEZ, and where they currently enjoy the duty exemption benefit on their procurements, be it on the import side or the domestic side. They are required to be a net foreign exchange earner. And if they clear, since it's a deemed foreign territory, they have to pay customs duty and comply with other requirements, filing like APR and maintaining records, getting the endorsement done, etc. So from that perspective, if we look into the proposed scenario, what is changing? So first of all, as Gautam pointed out, from a DESH bill, from the unit perspective, which gives the impetus or a decision-making evaluation to a developer, is that the status quo will be there. The transition mechanism is provided in the DESH bill, where the existing business exemptions will be carried forward. Also, the status quo on the duty tax benefits continue, as Gautam pointed out, on the zero rating of the GST, apart from custom duty exemption continues. Apart from that, since the state are being now onboarded, expectation is that there will be additional or incremental benefit in terms of subsidy, working capital, etc., other incentives which state may come out. And there could be separate set of these incentives for the development hubs or the enterprise hubs or the service hubs. Two, it also becomes attractive for the unit because if the export and NFE is no longer there, the driver for establishment, and there are other eligibility criteria more to do with economic activity, while there could be the impact which needs to be evaluated from a reversal of duty perspective, which currently happens in the EOU as well. And even in MOVER, you do end up paying duties on your base on your input side. But the equalization levy, while the fate we understand it may not be there, but we still need to see what happens. And are there any alternatives that the government is contemplating? But as Gautam suggested or said, that idea is that the DESH bill or the units in the DESH bill or the development hubs have to have a domestic access, and it cannot be an island. So that is something that needs to be looked into. But yes, it gives an impetus because then it puts up a question that if I'm not exporting, can I look at optimization where units which are not export focused can also come if they meet other parameters, which we need to see what will they be. It can be employment, it could be investment, it could be technical innovation, etc. And as regards services, the DTA access on rupee payment at least gives the leverage to IT, ITS, SEZ to that extent that the current issues on the show cause notices being issued or not running foreign exchange at least gets dispensed with, and it gives me a better put me at an equal footing with the goods who are enjoying the same benefit. Apart from that, the DESH bill also says on the service hub side that there's no requirement of contiguity, which Gautam also touched upon from a denotification perspective, which is being deliberated again. So when they are, because currently an SEZ has to have a contiguous area, but now what is being explored is whether there could be a non-contiguous area, and whether, if I'm still using the term export unit and non-export unit, can they coexist or co-locate beyond the floor? The floors can be denotified or the building can be denotified. So it is under deliberation. So let's see what happens. But it again puts a put a option or a question as a point of consideration for the developer. Apart from that, the single window and ease of doing business measure, because a lot of self-certification and single form, simplified forms are to come. And the dispute resolution, while it was promised in the SEZ Act as well, but now they have gone ahead and came out with detailed proposal, which was part of Baba Kalyani's report task force as well, somewhere as a part of recommendation. And in some places, the state governments having their own arbitration. For example, Telangana has the arbitration center recently set up in Hyderabad. So there is even a discussion that whether it can be integrated and made at least the dispute resolution hub for the SEZs or the development hubs in the state of Telangana, etc. Moving on. Similarly, a question comes for manufacturing units, while manufacturing has not had that significant play in SEZs up till now, and that's what the concern of government was. But having said that, yes, manufacturing units are still there in SEZ. And for them also the question comes currently whether they need to be there, continue to be there versus exist. Again, while we need to still see, and it has to vary from sector to sector, case to case basis as well, and also what the finer print, what is the finer print brings in terms of act and rules. But again, an NFE requirement has gone, so you are not required to give commitment. You are not monitored your NFE. Your status quo on exemptions continue. Incremental benefit is also there. Zero rating is there. Of course, you need at times manufacturing would like to see, okay, I need to be in the zone, but can I have a flexibility of a mover if I am there? So, but it again, there are the parameters which we'll be discussing subsequently, that what is the relative benefit of a development hub versus mover or any other alternative, be it the tax benefit, the procedural benefit, the compliances. So that is something that needs to be seen and evaluated before making a decision. Also, what is the incremental benefits? Because are we getting more benefits vis-a-vis other alternatives, or states are committing more and there is much more apart from the duty tax benefits which is going to come? Is it going to make my life easier from a compliance perspective? Also, subcontracting now coming into play, that I can do subcontracting for domestic market as well is a I would say a relief, because until now it was only allowed for export perspective, but the only limited point is, again, as Gautam pointed out in when he was giving the overview, is that the threshold, also whether duty tax benefits will be available or how the treatment will happen. Compliance and implication, because again, transition versus exit implication have their own challenges, and whether it will be easier or it will be difficult. While government says exit will be easier, debonding will be easier. But again, if you want to exit currently vis-a-vis later on, and what are the alternatives, can you do, can it help you to optimize, is something one need to look into. Also from a DTA access perspective, while custom duty reversal is there on the input side and IGST will be there, equalization levy is still a point. Export benefits also is something, because foreign trade policy gives export benefits on the supplies to SEZ unit and also the drawback benefits. Now the foreign trade policy also due for renewal, so whether they will be available on in what form and shape, especially when there's no export compulsion now or obligation. So that is also an evaluation parameter one need to look into. Coming to the service units, while more or less it is the same, but certain leeway, again, the INR billing is a big plus, because then it gives me and puts me on the same footing as the goods manufacturing units. I currently had a problem, and this has been discussed, but because this requirement was put in the SEZ Act, so despite all the efforts of the Ministry of Commerce and Revenue, it could not be addressed. So it's now being addressed, and it was part of the Baba Kalyani report or recommendation, because when the interaction happened, this is one of the asks, and we have been seeing when we support our clients that notices were being issued. It continues to be issued today as well, but somehow government has seized of it, so it gives a relief. Subcontracting, again, as Gautam pointed out, the intention of the government, at least in discussion, is that the subcontracting will be available for service unit as well. That is that the development hub unit can subcontract into DTA, which was not clear currently, while there have been permissions and precedents, but the law was not very clear in SEZ rules. It most the rules largely were based on the goods related operations or businesses, so it was not clear, and it led to ambiguity or interpretation or differential interpretation. Also, subcontracting for DTA may help where you have footprints, maybe in STP or a DTA or an SEZ. How this will come out or pan out, what will be the concludes, we need to see. Maybe it will be a point of deliberation where the authorities and stakeholders have to come together. The flexibility in service hubs, which I discussed in the previous slide as well, if the service hubs can have a non-contiguous area and an export or non-export, that's the term currently I'm using, uh, will can if they can co-locate, will it give us the business a flexibility to have a consolidated operation or a more efficient operation? Something remains to be seen. What are the conditionalities? How will it operate? What will be the do's and don'ts, etc. And it also leads to a point that SEIS, which was one of the key export incentive, is still not there after 1920, and it got restricted, and certain categories were excluded. There is a value cap as well. So SEIS now being not being renewed. Other alternatives for service exporters are not there, and we are before WTO on EOU schemes, etc., including EPCG. So what is the alternative? Are the service providers going to get any alternative outside the development hub? So it is either STP or EOU. Again, EOU's fate is dependent upon what happens in WTO and what foreign trade policy will bring in. So that is also a part we have to look at as a service unit, apart from operational efficiency. The last point, which is a very sensitive point for service unit, is the work from home, which has been deliberated continuously in Ministry of Commerce through NASCOM and other stakeholders. And while the guidelines have come in and people have been applying, but the issue is still that the trade is saying that the 50% threshold is a bit difficult, and they are looking for a bit more leeway here. The industry saying not more than 8 to 10% workforce is willing to come. And then there is a tier 2 cities aspect that is being looked into. So with that requirement, how the WFH or the work from home policy will pan out in the development hub, and what are the other relaxations, because again there is a play between developers and the units on this as well. Operational areas being given up by the units, and they are doing work from home. Developers have their concerns, so somewhere this needs to be deliberated, because outside the SEZ, of course, WFH compliance will not be there. Then it's more to do with the requirements of the organization. So again, that's a trade-off that may be looked into and maybe advocated, and see what is the best fit for the service units. Coming to the next point is the industrial hubs, parks, which Gautam said, because this is something new being brought in as part of onboarding the state, which Honorable FM also said when she indicated the revamping of the SEZ bill, and this has been discussed with states as well. So if industrial hubs, if they become or convert to development hubs, they will have dual status of state industrial parks and hubs. So again, the issue will be, while the what is the next net tax duty benefit that you will enjoy, because you will be in a development hub and also you will be industrial hub. So are there any relative or incremental benefit that you're going to enjoy being there as a developer, if you're looking into, or as a business you're looking into, and how does it help you from a business and operational point? Are the development hubs or the states are going to give incremental benefit in terms of fiscal and non-fiscal support to these development hubs, which are there, which are also functioning as the development, is something we need to see, or there is a relative advantage, or is there a distinguishing factor between industrial hub working as a development hub or simply standalone development hub? Something that needs to be seen, maybe advocated, taken up by the state. And that's why we have to look at the state contours or the state policy and how it pans out in the rule part of it, or is a standalone policy from the state governments, because a lot of state governments are also developing their export policies, and they are also looking at their SEZ policies. For example, Gujarat has one, Maharashtra has one. So how they are going to now align themselves against the development hub proposals, where they are an equal partner and they will be supporting government as part of the single window dispensation. Also, the question comes in, if a state industrial park or hub becomes a development hub, how easy it will be to exit on denotify, including any impact on the duty tax benefits, including on the tenants who will be there. So that is also an aspect that needs to be looked into and evaluated from a state industrial park or house perspective, or the tenants who are there and who may be looking to see whether they can get on board as a development hub as well. So this leaves us to a second part of discussion, that how DESH while the DESH contours are still not there, we need to get into the final print and see what the final version is. But we are relying on what currently we are aware of, or what we are seeing in the draft bills, etc. So how does this take up against MOVER, Advanced Authorization Scheme, EPCG, Export Oriented Scheme, Unit Scheme as well? Mind you, some of the schemes are a foreign trade policy, and you have been reading in the newspaper that Ministry of Commerce is also going to undergo a restructuring, with DGFT also going to undergo a restructuring. And foreign trade policy contours will come out hopefully in October, but or latest by close of October, or the beginning of the end of October. That's the expectation, and we have to see what they bring on the table and what happens to these schemes. But we are talking currently the way the schemes are. So tax benefit, duty benefit, so certain parameters on which we normally evaluate the scheme. It can be tax benefit, it could be the approvals, the validity of the approval, obligations, domestic clearances, other facilitation, subcontracting. So duty tax benefit, if you look at MOVER, it is duty deferment. You don't need to pay anything. If you are exporting, there's no duty payment, so duty deferment in a way becomes exemption. If you are going to clear it domestically, then of course you have a duty payment. Though local procurement, there's no GST deferral, because government felt there's no need to break the chain as well. Advanced authorization, if you look into it, it's more an actual user condition. You have a custom duty exemption and deemed export benefits on supplies to advanced authorization holder. EPCG, again, you have a custom duty exemption, and you again have a deemed export benefits. EOU again enjoys the exemption from customs duty, and there is a deemed export supply benefit. Development hubs is saying they will maintain the status quo on custom duty and zero rating will continue. So there is a status quo apparently currently. The licensing in MOVER, you all are aware there's no license, there's no licensing requirement, expiry period to licensing. There will be one-time approval or a license that is given. Advanced authorization have a 12-month period to validity of the license. EPCG has a 24 months from an import perspective. EOU has a 5-year LOP, which again needs to be renewed. Development hub, currently they have not come out. They will say they will prescribe, but the expectation is that they may prescribe 5 years or 2 years depending upon contours. So it remains to be seen what exactly will be the contour of the validity. Export obligation, MOVER was positioned that it, unlike the export incentive scheme, there is no export commitment required to avail duty deferment. So that's a plus. That at least allows me to have a operation in MOVER where I do interface with domestic industry or domestic market and cater to export on need basis, and I enjoy my duty deferment on my capital goods and inputs. Advanced authorization requires a positive valuation of 15%, apart from meeting export obligation in quantity and value terms. EPCG, again, 6 times the duty saved an average of past 3 years, so it becomes, and it has to be done in a blockwise manner, so you have to track your export obligation against the duty saved. EOU, you need to be a positive net foreign exchange earner. That means your inflow should be in excess of your outflow, which includes any other payments made apart from imports of capital goods or raw materials, etc. Development hub, there will be no NFE or export obligation. That's what has been stated. Domestic clearance, again, no restriction so far as MOVER is concerned. Only thing is, yes, you have to pay the customs duty on the input side and GST on the output side. Advanced authorization, you cannot use the inputs for the domestic clearances because it's actual user condition till the time you have not met export obligation. EPCG, again, you can use the capital goods. There is no restriction, but you also need to meet your export obligation. EOU, again, you are allowed to do DTI interface, but the reversal of basic customs duty is there, and you have to pay GST. So it's more like a MOVER model, but not the entire duty, only basic custom duty reversal they are talking of here. Development hub, again, they are proposing that there has to be a input reversal on the customs duty side and GST payment. And of course, INA billing will be there for services. Moving on, subcontracting, MOVER allows that. Advanced authorization only if you have a supporting manufacturer. That's the limited point of subcontracting, and it has to be endorsed in your license. EPCG, again, no restriction, but you again need to have an approval to give the capital goods to that person, and it has to be duly mentioned in authorization or a subsequent approval. EOU, it is allowed. Again, the provisions are similar to current SEZ rules. The either production or production process, 50% of the FOB export. And development hub, again, they are saying that they will allow, but what are the contours from a tax duty benefit needs to be seen. License redemption, moreover, there's no requirement of license reduction or getting an export obligation discharge certificate. Advance authorization, it is there. EPCG, again, it is there. EOU, you need to either exit or renew or debond. Development hub, again, the auto renewal is now proposed, so that's a plus. You don't need to file application. Don't need to see auto renewal will be on what parameters and basis, and what will be the mechanics, even if it is auto renewal on the online portal. And debonding compliances, we expect that it to be made easy vis-a-vis the current situation. Incremental benefit, moreover, doesn't get any drawback or ROTTEP currently. Advance authorization also currently no drawback or ROTTEP, because it has to be notified and looked into subsequently, which the drawback committee was looking into. EPCG, drawback and ROTTEP is given currently. There is no exclusion. EOU, again, it was to come with the SEZ, so no drawback or ROTTEP currently. SEZ, again, the fitment committee or the drawback committee under Mr. Pillai was looking into it. But given now the development hub is coming and export focus is going, so at least the fate of ROTTEP, especially from the retrospective period, needs to be seen. But yes, they are talking of fiscal and non-fiscal benefits, include drawbacks, etc., including state benefits. So that's something that remains to be seen how it pans out and it works out as part of the rules or as a standalone dispensation. Also, EPCG and EOU scheme, we have spoken before WTO. So what will be the fate of the scheme from a future perspective? How they will be treated on the foreign trade policy? Will there be a tinkering? Is something remains to be seen, because sometimes back, DGFT was mulling on the concept that if MOVER is there, whether they need to continue with EOU as well or not. There will be a lot of stakeholders discussions also on that. And at that time, the decision was that let's continue with the status quo and see what happens under the new foreign trade policy. So I hope this gives you some bit of insight. With this, I hand over again to Gautam to walk you through the open issues which DESH bill may need to consider. These are some illustrative example. Again, I would say not exhaustive, but it may give you some food for thought from your own operation perspective. Over to you, Gautam.
Thank you, Rob. So this is coming to the final part of the presentation. If you heard my colleague Rahul speak also, these are some of the issues which we thought we will flag out. Now, under the DESH bill, what is proposed is the definition of authorized operations, that there would be a negative and a positive list for authorized operation. If there is a negative or a positive list, what it means is that, and we've seen today, a lot of incentives for SEZ are provided when goods or services are used for authorized operation. So what would this entail? How would it impact the tax benefits? And therefore, what operations can be done in a processing or a non-processing area? All that discussion and would need to be undertaken. So this is a concept which is new. Does it date back to the negative service tax regime? We will have to wait and watch, but this is something which the proposal is to be introduced. The other point, we spoke about partial debonding, even debonding of a floor. If that is a reality, that would actually mean that there could be an export and a non-export business operating out of the development hub. If that is the case, whether both the export and a non-export would enjoy all the benefits which are available to any other unit in the SEZ, there's a question mark. But the way legislation right now, but since it's just a bill, does not seem to differentiate the tax benefits on either of these. So sitting in a development hub, even providing a non-export business, you could avail all tax incentives, fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. Also, what the third point is that in the SEZ regime, we have seen since it was taken as deemed foreign territory, there has been a debate, there has been past judicial precedent that there should not be any export duties on supplies to SEZ. So if there is an export duty on physical export out of India, the same product is supplied to SEZ, there should not be an export duty on those supplies. Now, how would this be addressed in the DESH bill is yet to be seen. The other element is that export incentives. Today, when we are sitting in, there is a service unit in SEZ rendering services outside. The SEIS benefit were available. Right now, there are no SEZs which have not been announced, but in past, those were available. Likewise, whatever benefits which come in for services or export of goods which are available to a domestic unit, like ROTAP, etc., would those be extended to the units in the development hub? So that is point one. Also, point is that while the bill addresses that if there is a domestic vendor which supplies to SEZ, and from a GST perspective, this is zero rated, whether other export incentives like drawback, etc., would be available to that vendor or not. So both ways, export incentives to the vendor supplying to the to the unit in a development hub, and unit exporting goods out, whether they would be entitled to all the export incentives which any other unit outside a development hub is available. What is going to be the fate of FTWZ, which is the free trade warehousing zones? These zones have been facing constraints in terms of business, a lack of business, whether these would be falling part of service hubs or enterprise hub. As I said, the development hub, clearly there are two categories. Enterprise hub, which will be for manufacturing and also services could operate, but service hub is purely going to be for services. Now, whether these activities of warehousing, packing, repacking are classified as manufacturing or services would need to be seen. Equalization levy, I mentioned the first draft bill had this concept of equalization levy, which was an overall deterrent because it was against the main concept of the DESH bill to allow greater access to domestic market. We understand that this equalization levy is no longer being part of the bill which is being put forward. We'll have to wait and watch. However, if this bill comes in again, the whole it will put the entire DESH bill and the concept of DESH under red light again, whether it would see future perspective or not. Finally, ease of doing business. We have heard and spoken a lot about ease of doing business in past. One of the USP of the DESH bill is to have a single window clearances where there would be a single application which would be going on an integrated portal. And when I say integrated, this portal would integrate into the single window portals of the states, which the states have for various approvals. So there is a clear integration proposed between the central and state government, and therefore a single application could provide multiple approvals. Whether this would be a reality, whether it would come with additional cost of compliances, again a question mark which we want to put on the table today. So these are some of the open items which we believe we need to keep an eye on, and as the bill becomes an act and the rules which will come out for public consultation should probably address most of these uh, as we go along. So with this, to conclude, and we'll then open up for questions. I think what we have put down is basic four steps for companies to consider. One is, given that the bill is going to be a reality, it's a matter of time. Either the monsoon session, it is put across. By the winter session, it is put before the parliament, and if it gets an approval, maybe within this fiscal year itself, we will see it going through. The finance minister had mentioned that they would want to revamp the entire SEZ, while the reasons out there were more that there is a lot of vacant space and the WTO constraints. Even post that, the minister from the Commerce Ministry had mentioned that we will get this up and about in 4 to 5 months. I believe it's just a matter of time we will see this. So definitely, companies should look at what is the impact to their current operations, whether it gives them opportunity to consolidate all operations within development hubs going forward in view of the flexibility to cater to domestic market which the hubs provide, and additional tax incentives which the hubs are providing, or not. I think that's an opportunity which companies should consider and do some impact analysis. There will no doubt be open points, and this also is one of the outcomes of the impact assessment, which would be to identify open items which can be taken to the government. The government is listening, and therefore there will be opportunities to put your point across uh, when the rules come out, and then therefore that opportunity you should be ready with what the constraints and challenges are. And obviously, once the bill becomes an act and the rules are final, you may want to revisit the impact and then put an implementation plan together. So these are the four steps which we believe companies could consider. With that, I would again want to say thank you all for your patience, for listening to us and joining this session. And we would sort of take up some of the questions which are in the chat box. Yeah, I can jump into the questions. I know we are up on the hour, but spend another 5 minutes. The first question out here is, what is the status of work from home in DESH? Rahul, you want to pick that up?
Work from DESH perspective currently has not been deliberated because the current amendment more has come from SEZ rules perspective, but it's a issue which is before Commerce Ministry. And in fact, today there was supposed to be a deliberation on that as well, but couldn't happen. So I expect that it will come as part of the rules. But yes, industry needs to push through their association. NASSCOM is doing a lot of work around it. So maybe it will be a good idea for the stakeholders to converge. And of course, as Commerce Secretary pointed out, the development hub has two players, the developers as well as the unit. So they need to work out a plan, and both have the different contradicting interest here. So how it will work out, what will be the percentage, and whether you want what kind of procedures and compliances you want, something that needs to be deliberated currently.
So just to add, while the current bill, I believe, did not have this work from home, it would rather come in through the rules. Could be that's the one possibility. I think the point which should be looked at by industry is that currently the work from home provides for 50%, subject to the jurisdictional officers in their discretion enhancing that 50%. Now, what we understand that it's a matter of time over a period of 1 year, government may want to limit it to 50%. So in case this 50% is not what is suiting the industry, this is an opportune time that should be represented, so that the DESH bill, when it comes in, the 50% threshold maybe to start with could be 75, and it is forming part of the legislation itself rather than left to the discretion. Moving ahead, since DESH hub are no longer required to merely export focus, what is the possibility of complete zero rating of all supplies to units in DESH hub from a GST perspective? Yes, very relevant question. The way the bill is there, it does not differentiate between a unit which is exporting or a unit which is not exporting. In the scheme of things, all supplies to a development hub are zero rated, irrespective of the finished goods supplied outside India or in the domestic market. So as we speak, yes, uh, all supplies to DESH hub are zero rated from a GST perspective. Great. I don't believe there were these two questions. Happy to take up any further follow-up questions if anyone
Gautam, one
has.
more question has come out. Is trading activity will be allowed under DESH? So trading is there. Trading is part of services. It is there.
Okay,
I
so
don't see any more
with
questions.
this, we will take your opportunity to thank you again and hand over to the organizers for their concluding remarks.